Students of history know that King Reginald of Bavaria has come down to posterity as King Candy. A compliment is supposed to the amiability of that simple but well-liked monarch. The following story, which I heard recently, seems to give another origin to the nickname. After Cinderella married her prince, they lived happily ever after, for years and years, and Cinderella, she was queen now, of course, for the prince had succeeded his father long ago, had a grown-up grandson. You can't imagine your Cinderella as a grandmother, I expect, but you must try to, for as she is necessary for the story, and it is quite possible, inevitable sometimes even, for the youngest and prettiest people to become grandmothers. And it doesn't prevent them from keeping young or pretty either, especially if they have, like Cinderella, a sense of humor. I'm going to call her Cinderella for old sakes. But you must please picture her as a very stately little old lady indeed, with a way with her, and strings, decorations, and orders, and high-sounding names, and a crown on her head, sometimes a twinkle in her eyes, as always. Her grandson was the Grand Duke Reginald. He was son of the Crown Prince, and he was 20 years old. A bit of an ass, and in the Guards. The Crown Prince, his father, hardly ever came to town. He was frightfully taken up with the short thorns and roses, so he lived in the country. He was spoken of as a recluse, but he was only lazy. The Grand Duke Reginald, however, was fond of society of all sorts. He was impressionable. Take, for example, the affair of Miss Jennifer Joy. Jenny for Joy, as she would humorously autograph her photos. Miss Joy was very impressively pretty indeed, and at the Wriggle-Raggle Theatre she danced divinely. Reginald was as impressed as only a youthful guardsman can be, and as he was heir to the crown, his devotion was Ponte Fogos to Miss Joy. But at heart she preferred sausage and mashed and idée. Well, his attentions caused her, some said, to be more odious than ever. Personally, I don't consider that Jenny Joy was odious at all. She was only young and very regrettably conceited. But then she was very regrettably spoiled. However, to such lengths did her silly self-esteem carry her that what do you think she contemplated? You'll be shocked, I know, but it was nothing less than the persuasion of the lovesick Reginald to borrow his grandmother's little old magic glass slippers, which were put away with the crown jewels, and to let her, Jenny, wear them at a forthcoming artist's ball. Did you ever hear the like? And she had the presumption to think that they would fit her, too. I ought to say here, in case you don't know, that the fairy godmother had, and what more likely, given Cinderella as a wedding present, the fellow of the little glass slippers that she lost at the ball, and which the prince had picked up, so she had the pair of them for keeps. Reginald was greatly concerned when Jenny made her request. One of the state coaches, now, or some jewels, but the glass slippers. Absolutely impossible, my dear child, said he. Grandmamma would never allow it, and yet, hopefully, perhaps they would be too small. How can you talk like that? Said Jenny. Of course they wouldn't be a bit too small, and need her nibs, you know. Wasn't Jenny rude? And I'm sure you could easily manage it if you tried, and if you don't love me. Now, if your name is Reginald, and you have a weak chin, and if you are in love at the same time, and if your beloved talks like that, why, it's 10 to 1, you'll promise simply anything. So, Reginald said he'd see, and Jenny said he was rather a dear boy, and she told her best friend called Maud about the slippers. But that's where Jenny went wrong, for Maud was a niece of Cinderella's maid, Higgins, who had been with her for years and years, and Maud told her aunt what Jenny had said, and Higgins thought it her duty to tell Cinderella how his Grace, poor dear young gentleman, was being put upon. Now, Cinderella, who was a very good matchmaker, had been meaning to marry Reginald to the wealthy and virtuous princess of a neighboring land. The princess's name was Selena. That will help you to keep imagining her. And Miss Joy, of whom Cinderella had heard, was interfering with her plan. Cinderella had a nimble brain, and she at once, in what Higgins had said, a chance of letting Reginald make Jenny look so foolish that she would certainly send him about his business, which was, of course, to marry Selena. So she said, "Thank you, Higgins. You did well to mention it." And her eyes twinkled more than ever. And Cinderella sent for the court confectioner. And the court confectioner came in his white linen coat, and Cinderella told him to make for her out of the best colorless sugar candy a pair of slippers on the model of the famous little glass ones, of which she gave him the measurements, but she said they must be, about 2 sizes larger at least. And the court confectioner said, and did, as directed, and the sugar candy slippers looked just like the glass ones, only bigger. But you'd not have noticed that unless you saw the 2 pairs together. Then Cinderella hid the glass slippers on the top of the wardrobe and put the candy ones in the case with the crown jewels. Reginald had promised Jenny that he'd bring the slippers with him to the ball. She could put them on there, and he could take them back afterwards, but he did hope nobody would know. But Jenny had not been able to resist talking, and it was all over the place that she was actually to wear the truly fairy godmother slippers. They were betting on the stock exchange as to whether Jenny would get them or not. Cinderella was not surprised when, on the night of the ball, Reginald borrowed the key of the crown jewel case in order to get out some ancestral studs that he wanted to wear at the Archbishop's. She gave him the key with a smile, and her best wishes for a pleasant evening. Reginald said that he would personally put the studs away when he came in, and that he would return the key to her in the morning. Jenny gave a squeal of delight when she saw the slippers. She first went into ecstasies, and then into the cloakroom to put them on. They fitted her splendidly, and in spite of herself, she'd been just a wee bit nervous about that. When she entered the ballroom a minute later, she was fonder of herself than ever, and her feet were the cynosure of all eyes, as a reporter put it, using the expression for the first time. Of course you can guess what happened. After Jenny had been round the room about twice, she, who usually danced like a cork on a mill race, seemed to Reginald to be moving as stickly as a cow in a lane, or, if you prefer a more graceful simile, a gazelle in a quicksand. And presently the poor child got mighty red and had to stop. She seemed rooted to the floor. Then, while everybody tiptoed and teetered, the sugar candy began to melt properly, and almost before you could say "Mon Galace," she was standing with her pretty feet, for they were very pretty, in 2 little pudgy messes of molasses. Jenny had literally been lifted out of the wreck of her slippers and carried from the room, and she caught some of the messy stuff on her fingers, and she licked it off primitively. She was about 18. And she said, "Sugar candy, by gum!" But the candy had spoiled 2 things: Jenny's silk stockings permanently, and the floor for an hour or more. In fact, a bit of it had to be roped off for the rest of the night. It had also made Jenny quite pardonably cross. But she was a young woman of spirit, and she was not going to let it spoil her evening too, so she went home and changed her stockings, and came back and danced like a feather till 6 in the morning, but not with Reginald, to whom she said outspokenly just what she thought. The whole matter was extremely disagreeable, so Reginald went home before supper, and he was greatly relieved when he got there to find the glass slippers in the crown jewel case. When next morning He returned the key to his grandmamma, made no comment. Nor did Reginald, finding that Jenny refused to be pacified, but perhaps he didn't try very hard. He was beginning to get tired of being laughed at, and on her part Jenny was, between ourselves, getting to find her Duke a bit of a bore. Reginald shortly afterwards married Selina. Jenny bestowed upon him as a sort of wedding honor the nickname of Candy, which has proved to be as sticky as it sounds, since it has stuck to him till today, as you know. Jenny herself eventually married the man who played the trombone at the Wriggle Raggle, and lived happily ever after. So did Reginald.